Scotty,
Yo.
great to have you on board again. Playoffs. Fucking playoffs. That's my own ad lib to Coach Mora's line many years ago. It's amazing. The playoff time, we're getting closer. There's all of this discussion about who's in line for the playoffs, who's on the front side looking in or backside looking in, who are down the line opportunities. Have you been thinking about the playoffs yourself?
Thinking about it, I think we're in the playoffs. I mean, this league is parity, parity, parity. I think the playoffs started a few weeks ago for a handful of teams. We're in it now.
I agree. I agree. And it's funny because as I've been thinking about the playoffs, I just got back from Colorado. We talked about it last week. I'm here trying to get my house sold. I've actually sold my house. And no, I'm not leaving Atlanta, everyone. This is my home base. But I've sold the house. I'm in flux. And all I really want to do is watch football and see who ends up in the playoffs. And that's been on my mind. What I'd love to do today is talk about the playoffs. I'd love to talk about the up and downs, the ebbs and flows, how it feels to go into a season thinking you're going to be in the playoffs. And as the season goes on, all of a sudden you have a shot in hell to be in the playoffs. That is a difficult time. But winning in playoffs are huge for the success of your team, for the longevity of your job and the head coach's job. It is the way it is, man.
No doubt. I think back to something one of my favorite coaches I worked for, he once told me, you don't win Super Bowls in September. And if you think about it, think about all those teams that were off to a hot start. Like everybody was saying, Buffalo's untouchable this year. And now all of a sudden it's like they might not even make the playoff. Like it's amazing how the tides and the ebbs and flows of this league go.
Ebbs and flows, no question. So you're exactly right on the Bills. You're right on Cleveland kicking it off. They come in strong. Everyone's playing them up. And we all love Andrew Berry as a management person, of course, as a GM. We like what they're doing there. And now they're fighting something we'll talk about a little bit later. There's a lot going on there. On the flip side, Scott, you have teams that are hanging on for dear life, potentially their jobs, which, again, I don't like to talk lightly about hot seats, but, the Giants right now, again, I think Dave Gettleman is a really good football man. I think Joe Judge will continue to coach there. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. But can you imagine the day-to-day operations when you are hanging on by the skin of your teeth and everyone's talking about whether the Giants are going to get into the playoffs? How do you manage that as a general manager? Here's Dave. He's hearing all this, everything about the up and down, the hot seat, etc. How does he handle it? I remember those days. I remember back when Mike Smith and I were doing well, and all of a sudden we got to year 13 and things were really uncertain. And you had to go into the building every day looking at everyone reporting on the probability of getting into the playoffs or not getting into the playoffs. And with not getting into the playoffs meant possibly losing our jobs. But believe me, that is dusty. It's not easy at a lot of levels, not just my own level as a general manager, but my relationship with the head coach and my relationship with the owner and my relationship with the rest of the people within the organization.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember being in the building and people would often say things like, oh, I don't pay attention to the record. I don't pay attention to the percentage of chances of us making the playoff. Like everybody would talk so much about what they don't pay attention to that they clearly were paying attention to. And so it was interesting because I would often talk with GMs and head coaches about how much do we make a thing a thing. And sometimes it's one of those elements where it's unavoidable, especially as you're driving your car on your way into the facility and you're listening to the sport radio talk show and, we're about to make a run, all of that kind of dialogue and hype. So, I think my first question for you is the playoff talk noise and a distraction, or is it a motivator?
Hands down, it is not noise. It is about winning. Remember, let's talk about Ann Arbor. Let's talk about Bo Schembechler, the team. Great speech, by the way. It's about the wins, the wins, the wins. As a general manager, no question about it. If you're not winning, if you're not getting into the playoffs, and if you're not winning playoff games, your longevity in this league is very limited. And don't try to work on the good side of your owner by saying, oh, okay, we'll come along. It is about the here and now. This is a not for long league, as you know, And if you're not jumping on it, if you're not focused on winning in the playoffs, getting to the playoffs, first of all, and winning in the playoffs, and if you're not focused on taking down the teams in your division, Scott, which is a whole other thing we could talk about forever, there are a lot of nuances and elements to this, but rest assured, it is about winning and it's about getting into the playoffs to survive.
No doubt. I just go back to how many coaches were on the hot seat 3 weeks ago that now are being talked about as coach of the year potential, and how many teams were being asked about ring sizes and now are like, circling the wagons, as they say.
Yeah, circling the wagons. Again, the ups and downs of this league. We talked about parity, right? We talk about parity, and with parity comes teams rising and falling and everything that we talked about a few sessions ago. As back to this topic, when you're around your building and you're leading into the next week and you think you have potentially a 30% chance of getting into the playoffs, man, your head as a general manager is all over the place. You're thinking about you're thinking about what you have done and what you need to do better. You think about the coaches, the head coach. You have conversations, we'll talk about that a little bit, with your head coach, but you also have conversations not only with your head coach about your head coach, you have it about his coordinators and definitely about his position coaches. That is vital. And you tend to get to a spot where you're looking at everything under the umbrella as a general manager to determine why in the hell you're in a spot where you have a 30% chance versus a 75% chance, right? That's what we all want. We go into the season on the top of the world thinking we have that, and all of a sudden things started breaking down and we are on the outside looking in. Not fun place to be, believe me, not only with the fan base and the media, which we could talk about as well, but also with your owner.
One thing that I would add to the conversation when it comes to the analytics, and analytics is definitely here to stay, and I value it, but I think most people misinterpret analytics. I think most people think of analytics the way they do like a grading assignment. So it's like 90% is like I got an A. It's a virtual lock. When I think the reality is analytics is really about a probability of something happening. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean it was wrong. It just means certain things occurred that push the occurrence into the 10%. So sometimes I like to explain this to coaches and GMs because I think we can get lost in the numbers. So what I'll say is, like, imagine someone tells you that there's an 80% chance of it raining. So you go and buy a bunch of umbrellas for the team. Well, if it doesn't rain, that doesn't mean the analytics was wrong. It just means certain things happened that caused the 20% chance to actually occur. So why do I bring that up? I bring it up because when teams over-focus on the number, 75% chance, 30% chance, they, I think, are looking at magic rather than the controllables, which is like, you know what? We still have to improve our running game. We still have to complete and improve our third down conversions and things like that, the things that really matter that actually push those statistics. It's like the analytics is the output, not the input of what we're doing.
Great point. So think about this. Okay, so you're gunning to get into the playoffs. You're working hard. Everyone's coming together, and you see the team bonding and pulling, through the really tough times. And then you end up like we did in 2009 with myself and Mike Smith, again, historically speaking, my own experience, and you are just over the 500 mark, right? You have the wins that determine that you are no longer 500 and you have had a winning season, but you didn't get into the playoffs. You want to talk about a sort of bittersweet. Yes, you got in, but you have a lot of people, including your owner, who says, thank God we're finally 2 winning seasons in a row, because they hadn't had that in Atlanta ever. We were able to pull it off, but you don't think that was a really, really down moment for myself and Mike Smith coming off of the first year we were together when we got into playoffs? It was about the playoffs, and we did not accomplish that. So again, mixed emotions for sure. I'm not talking about the lazy a-hole reporters. I'm talking about the good reporters. I'm talking about the well thought out reporters. I have a lot of really good respect for media, There are some that I don't, and it happens to be the ones that are lazy, who are just throwing things out. That's a whole other topic. All right, Scott, we're going on the couch. Put me on.
So, I thought for this week, an interesting topic would be, kind of what stings. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you've got a game on Monday night, like Monday Night Football is a special night, right? It's the one game that has all attention, all eyes. You ask anyone in the league, Monday night games are special. They have the history, everything. One thing that most people, when they look under the hood or how the sausage is made, that they don't realize is Monday night is also a really hard game for a lot of players and coaches and front office folks because you're just sitting around waiting, and it's a long wait. See, Sunday night, you can watch the Sunday games, but Monday, all you're doing is listening to banter. All you're doing is listening to social media, Twitter. So I always found it interesting because, you talk to a lot of coaches and players and they say, oh, I don't pay attention to that stuff. Well, on a Monday, if you've got Monday Night Football, if you've got that game, that's exactly what you're paying attention to. So I guess my question to you, Thomas, is did you ever receive something from the media or something from, say, a fan through Twitter, because now they've got direct access, unlike anything before, that really kind of stung? Was there something that stuck with you?
Well, let me start by saying 100% agree with your lead-in. This idea of what I like to refer to, and I look at it often. Again, we signed up for it. We knew what we were expecting in this job. It's never easy. And I will call bullshit out on most people in this league who say, oh, I never read that, or I never listen to that. It's degrees of it. Some people handle it much better than others, but there is no doubt in my mind that everyone has a sensitivity to it because they're human and they're damn competitive. They want nothing better than to be accepted by their fan base. As hard as this is to say, they want to be accepted by the respected media in their world. I'm not talking about the lazy a-hole reporters. I'm talking about the good reporters. I'm talking about the well thought out reporters. I have a lot of really good respect for media. There are some that I don't, and it happens to be the ones that are lazy, who are just throwing things out. That's a whole other topic. And then, you're talking about fan base, you're talking about media, and you're talking about owners. I've had so many conversations with general managers who have talked about caring about the owners and what they're thinking on this whole quest to get into the playoffs and how it's being portrayed. Again, so in my mind, there are three areas that are worth talking about. I would love to talk about first the fan base. Fans are entitled to their opinions. They pay a lot of money. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. There are some really good fans, and there are some fans that are off the wall and off the charts. When you would walk down after a game or the last 6 minutes of the game, there were some really tough years and a lot of invective hurled my way until some of the security guards would go up there and stop. My resentment toward fan base, Scott, and I want you to comment on this, it's human nature. My resentment toward the fan base had much more to do with my desire to be able to take 200,000 of the fans that we had in Atlanta and sit down for 20 minutes and have a really good discussion about what really was happening within the organization. This isn't about excuses. That's where I felt at times the resentment came, like I wasn't able to express myself. We as an organization didn't put the GM out there to talk regularly, and we did that by design. The fan base, because they're an intelligent fan base, and the NFL fan base is intelligent, I think they're entitled to legitimate information from organization to organization.
So I think Mark Twain had this great quote about never get in a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel and paper by the ton. And I've worked with a few coaches, for example, where the relationship with the media was contentious, to say the least. And it's a losing battle, because while they get to focus on certain areas, you're still focused on winning, 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 as you said earlier. But I noticed you didn't really answer the question. Was there a tweet or a headline that stung?
Oh, I think any time for a general manager, and for me specifically, and I would say most of my contemporaries, where it really stings, it's not as much about the decisions being made. It's if there is a pointed critique of your evaluation prowess. And again, there are so many layers to that. There are so many people involved, even though ultimately the general manager has say in acquisitions. He is taking a lot of information in from his head coach, from his coordinators, from his position coaches, as well from an entire personnel department. There is a lot involved, but it's still, you take it personally when people are saying, well, he can't evaluate this position or that position. Look at the track record. And too many times there are reasons, again, not excuses, but there are reasons. Some you miss on, some you don't. I think it's when, again, you miss on someone for reasons that you can't share. Could be character, it could be abuse, whatever it may be out there that you can't share publicly. That's where it's complicated. But look, there are many times, there are many tweets. I didn't read the tweets, but I had people come to me quite often and share. And again, those aren't easy to read. Even if you're the toughest, most thick-skinned person, it's complicated. To your point on media, let me revisit media for 30 seconds. When I say there's resentment toward media, again, I have a lot of really good media friends, as you do. There are the ones that are thought out and intelligent and have done their work. I respect, and I will listen to both sides. They will come to me and talk to me about, the ups and downs of our organizations over the years. I am fine with that. It is the lazy reporter and the lazy media people who are just rewriting what they think they know. And then what they're doing is they're fueling and feeding the fan base, where I think that media person or those media people should be called out, because they are the ones that are misleading the fan base, not just Aaron Rodgers, who they're calling out on misleading. There is a lot of misleading coming from the lazy reporters out there, in my mind. Let's jump quickly, if you have nothing else to say about media, and I understand ink by the barrel. Let's talk about owner resentment. I was very fortunate to have an owner who had my back. I mean, to be there for 13 years in the NFL as a general manager, Scott, I get it. It's not easy. Was I unhappy when I got fired last October? Hell yes. Did I think it was going to happen? Not necessarily. It did. I've settled into that. I get it. I think when I've talked to a lot of my contemporaries around the league who get upset with their owners, it's when their owner does not have their back publicly, and when they hang them out to dry in certain situations. My personal feeling, and what I would say if an owner asked me, how do you think I should handle my GM and my head coach? I would say to the very end, you stay on their side, even if you are thinking about firing them. And I know that's a tough contradiction. But I think when you hang out your general manager or your head coach mid-season, that becomes really, really, I call it dusty. It becomes an impediment to their thought process. And I would love you to comment in the last part of this session. How do you think that plays into it when a GM or head coach is trying to run their jobs and their teams, when they're adding the ultimate insecurity, when they are not given a solid endorsement going to really precarious times within a season?
Yeah, so here would be kind of my psychological lens. Human beings are a communal creature. We're tribal by nature. In fact, we release oxytocin, which is that feel-good chemical that helps bring us together. It's the bond. So, when we look at the evolution of humanity, the way that we've been able to succeed, and to date we are the only species on this planet to go to the moon, the way we did it was really working as a collective. So the only people who are immune to rejection of whatever kind or format are robots and sociopaths. And so it's interesting because if you look at like a lot of successful individuals, not just in sport, but outside of sport, a lot of successful individuals, they can have sociopathic tendencies because they fall under a category where they can be very charismatic to help kind of get the things in their agenda pushed through. And they can also be somewhat robust against the things that are icky or sticky that someone who's monitoring the tribe might be more uncomfortable doing. So I bring that up because there's nothing wrong with leadership having sociopathic tendencies, but you do want to be careful of that mutation. And one of the places where it can mutate is in the sting of the media, fan, and ownership relationship dynamic. Because here's something that I think happens, right? Compared to 5, 10 years ago, the ability to have access to send a tweet, to send a DM, to send a message, like fans and the celebrities, whether it's sport or not, they've never had this kind of 1 degree click to connect to one another. And in sports, the best way to be right is to talk about how something won't work. Because the reality is, everybody's going to have a season that didn't work except for the one team that's holding the trophy at the end of the year. And even that team, it's not a repeatable recipe. It's only used for the unique circumstances of what led to this year, whether it be weather or injury or rule adjustments. So I always think about this idea of, if you want to be right in the media or if you want to be right in the fan base, all you have to do is say this doesn't work and give it time, and eventually it won't. The part where I think things get really tricky with ownership is some owners, I think, listen to that fan base or that media base too much. You know, I can tell you a story where an owner kind of came back from a cocktail party where a couple of fans mentioned something about how a wide receiver should be used. The owner then brings that up to the head coach. Hey, how come we're not using the wide receiver this way? And that sent the head coach on a journey that took about 4 hours of cutting film and creating a Excel sheet to show the owner why we don't use that player in that way, that was completely detracted from the quest of winning on Sunday. So I find the fragility of all of this is really something to monitor.
Look, I love the lucid insight once again. Thank you, Scott Goldman. I appreciate it. I will say to the last comment, how many times that can happen within an organization, and myriad conversations with general managers who have had to deal with this. The owners are the owners, and the owners own the train set. They are going to come up with ideas. It's not always what we want to hear. And more than not, we jump into these sessions of trying to cross T's and dot I's and get answers for them, because we expect the same from our assistant coaches and our personnel directors, just like they expect from us. It's not easy. And at times it's a major impediment. You, I think, as a general manager or a head coach, have to have a grasp of that and know when to tell everyone else, turn off the jets. Let's pull back. That's up to us. There are many times I did not do a good job with that, Scott, over the years, where time was spent on projects that I should have cut off at the chase. Thanks, Scott.
In your opinion, is there a one and done coach out there right now? And is there anybody, why would you do it? Why would you not do it? What are your thoughts about the hot seat in a short-term setting?
Well, of course, you have two coaches that are rumored as being one and done. That's Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and that's, Dan Campbell in Detroit. Rumored. I don't know how much a rumor it is. I think it's asinine. Okay, Scott, we're back. Quick hits.
All right, let's start with the first one. Green Bay Packers has been a well-publicized strained relationship. Could winning ever be a bad thing? It seems like the more successful they are, the more it might change the power dynamics between them and their star player. Thoughts?
Let's just say, first of all, Brian Gutekunst, longtime football person from the day he was born, very similar to me. His dad was a coach, really well respected, knows football in and out. Of course, is growing as a general manager. Put yourself in his position as the leader, one of the leaders, the team builders of the organization, with one of the stars in the league who basically, again, I don't know how else to say it, has you over the barrel a little. Everything that Aaron Rodgers does, this organization appears to have to be accepting of it. So this could be COVID. This could be showing his little toe on Zoom, which is a whole other topic. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is great at what he does, and yet Aaron Rodgers, has his his thumb on the trigger. And that's not easy for a general manager. You have to get up in the morning and go to sleep at night and look at yourself in the mirror and say, how much am I giving? How much am I being true to myself and what I believe for this organization? And how much am I doing it to help the organization win? Ultimately, Brian's doing everything he can to help the organization win. And they're one of the best teams in the league. That's, again, that is a really, really mixed emotion as a general manager.
You know, the one thing I know to be true about relationship dynamics, the least invested person has all the power. And the reason why the least invested person has all the power is because they have the atom bomb, which is to terminate the relationship. I think it's not just in Green Bay, but I think there's a lot of players right now and front offices that are watching the relationship dynamic because I think it might be that we're seeing not just in Green Bay, but other cities as well, where people might say, I might want to choose to be less invested than the team in the maintenance of the longevity of our relationship. All right, let's go to the next one then. We were talking in the last segment about social media and how much access players and coaches have to their fan base, but also that kind of goes in a couple of different directions. So what happens when family members start to come into the mix and they start to also post? I mean, it's not like they're promoting internal secrets because they're outside the building, but at the same time, they too have a unique relationship to the organization and to the players. So how would you go about managing family members taking things public in the social media?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to have the discussions, as we all know, and it gets really old. Social and digital today is what it is. We know we have to navigate and manage it as general managers and as head coaches. You have to accept that. And it's not only the kids on your team, the players on your team, it is their parents. Their parents are more our age, and they are smack dab in the middle of social and digital. I don't bemoan them for being on social and having opinions. What I do struggle with, and back to when I was in the middle of running and co-running an organization, is when things were tweeted and information was out that put a wrench in the operation of your team. So what I would say is, get your opinions out there at a certain level, but please be mindful for your child who you're hoping is going to get a big contract, whether it's with the team they are with now or another team. Make no mistake about it. If you're an adult who continues to cause turmoil within an organization, that is ultimately going to affect your child's next contract. Teams are not going to dive into a family setting, at least where you want them to, if they know that there is a big sort of pot of turmoil waiting. That is an issue. Don't fuck it up, fathers. Be there for your kids and help them make as much money as possible. And the best way to do that is be supportive and be real, but be mindful.
Yeah, this is chess, not checkers, right? And what might feel like a win in the short term could actually be used against you in the long term. Lots of different ways to show unconditional love and support besides just taking on a public defense, if you will.
The last point I have, Scott, is it is up ultimately to the head coach to control the environment and make it known that it is unacceptable. I know they can only do so much as a head coach, but if you set the tone, then you are less apt to have situations that are happening in Cleveland than otherwise. And I think that's something to know, that head coaches, again, they have their hand on the steering wheel for sure.
So I'll counter that because I actually would go in the other direction. As a head coach, you can't create a rule that you can't enforce, or I would recommend not creating a rule you can't enforce. You tell a player that he needs to shut down a family member. I'm not so sure, one, that player is really going to want to do that. It brings up a relationship, family dynamic that you might not want to mess with. And what's the coach going to do? I mean, worst case scenario, you either cut the player, and again, we go back to least invested, or you start to do conduct detrimental to the team type fining, which is only going to further schism the relationship. So I'm not so sure I would die on that hill if I was a head coach recommending someone not have a family member tweet.
And I will banter the highly respected sports psychologist who comes at it from an academic standpoint, I would say I agree. There is a way to deliver it. I'm a big believer in semantic responsibility. If you deliver it in the right way and you educate, that's probably what I'm saying more. There's only one person on the team that can educate that way. Yes, your player programs guy can. I'll throw a pump in here for Kevin Winston, was one of the very best in the league, could help us make sure that the players understood what they were doing. I just believe that the head coach pulls that player in and says, let's talk about this. This is about the betterment of this organization. Let's take care of this. Let's work together on getting Pops in the right mode. Let's do whatever we need to do to make him feel like his voice is heard in his own way, not going overboard, of course.
Yeah, I think the concept is we've got a lot going on. Winning is hard enough. We don't need to add anything else to the mix, right? And I think it's about getting everybody on that page, not just you and me, but you, me, and family member. Winning is hard in this league. Let's not make it tougher on us, kind of stuff. All right, last one. It's very rare to see a one and done coach, but it does happen. In your opinion, is there a one and done coach out there right now? And is there anybody? Why would you do it? Why would you not do it? What are your thoughts about the hot seat in a short-term setting?
Well, of course, you have two coaches that are rumored as being one and done. That's Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, and that's Dan Campbell in Detroit. Rumored. I don't know how much a rumor it is. I think it's asinine. Let me start with that. These guys are longtime football men, one collegiately, of course. Dan Campbell. Let's move over to Detroit for a minute. Let's talk first about Brad Holmes. Can you imagine being a first-time general manager? I can. I've been there. And having such a tumultuous season so far and having some of this scuttlebutt out there that there should be consideration for this being a one and done, ridiculous. And I think Brad needs to navigate that properly, which he will. Again, he has a lot of background in football. He's been around Les Snead, who has a proper way of approaching things and an organization that does out when he was in LA. The way that he handles this, he needs to be the supportive guy for his partner in all this. I'm a huge believer in that. You are partners. I don't care who has Final 53 together. GM and head coach are traveling together through all the ups and downs, especially early on. Of course, Brad is going to be there. That, again, that's not easy for a first-time general manager. You don't think he's going to bed at night wondering what tomorrow will bring? I've been there. It is not comfortable, and it churns your stomach. And yet, in the end, it's about being a teammate with your head coach. Dan Campbell deserves much more time than he's even, given to date. He knows that he needs to continue to grow in areas, and we'll see how it goes. Believe me, there are other people in the organization that we used to hear about early on in all of this. I'm not hearing about from now. It's really something that needs to be known. It starts off, everything's kind of fluffy, and everyone's having a good time kicking off the season. But as things get rough, it starts narrowing down. Believe me, it comes down to a head coach and a GM taking the brunt, not executives, not owners. That's where the focus is.
Yeah, I think big ships turn slowly has always been one of my phrases. I think the illusion of the NFL parity is that any team can go from worst to first just like that, when reality is something pretty magical and special has to happen. Where most programs are built on success is really with time and effort. And I think it's important to get your players in and to give your system a chance. I think some of the programs in this league that seem to be at the bottom of the division more often than not throughout their history, it's because they have that quick turnover and not given a chance for their system to really give it a good shot.
Again, really appreciate you joining today. This was a fun session and an energetic session. Look forward to talking to you real soon, brother.
Cool. Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks for the time.